Good morning, everybody. This is Carrie Getz with Strategicom, and we are here with another episode of our podcast. Today, we're talking to Dameion Brown, who is a veteran in the security industry, heavy in cybersecurity. So that gives us another little avenue to talk about. So, Dameion, why don't you introduce yourself and your background to everybody, and then we'll go on from there.
Yeah, and Carrie, look, I appreciate it, and it's a definitely an honor and a high privilege to be here today to talk to you about my humble beginnings and what I do. I'm a veteran, as you mentioned. So 21 years in the Army, both National Guard and Reserves, 2 tours, Bosnia and Afghanistan, and civilian-wise, I work for a oil and gas company. I say mom and pop oil and gas company because it's a family-owned company, but it's a multi-segmented billion-dollar oil company that's headquartered out of Jackson, Mississippi. I've been doing working there for 11 years, and I've been doing security there. And it's both regulatory and then performance-based too. So there are some things that we do from the standpoint of the Coast Guard and what the Coast Guard enforces on the navigable waterways. So we make sure those stakeholders are compliant with those things. And then that forces me to be a jack of all trades and master of none as far as CCTV camera systems, security guards, uh, what have you, cybersecurity, duty of care. So people that are traveling in and out of Mexico, our assets that are in Mexico and worldwide. And then on top of that, I do a little grant work. There is a program that FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security partner with. It's the Port Security Grant Program. And so our stakeholders have received grant funds throughout the various fiscal years. And since I've been at the company, I have either applied for, administered, drawn down, sat through audits of $3.2 million worth of funds. So, just a myriad of different things that I do. And so, that's a little bit of what I do day to day.
Very good. Wow, that's quite the background there. So,
Yeah.
I I did not realize that you guys did stuff on the waterways. That's really interesting as far as ships and ship passing and all that
Mhm.
kind of good stuff. So where all do you guys operate?
So we operate worldwide. 48 states in the contiguous U.S. and then, like I said, Mexico. There's some offices in Europe, Belgium, or whatnot, and then there's some offices in Asia, offices and operations in Asia too as well. So it's pretty much worldwide, international. The owner of the company, I World War II vet, and I had the pleasure of being around him before he passed away about 2 years ago. And Real sharp guy. And they decided to, I mean, you always go global, right? Because oil is everywhere, but they decided to take the company global in 2008. And so now, fast forward to 2020, and they are pretty much in all over the world. They, deal with different, customers in different places. So it's definitely fascinating and interesting, to say the least.
Which brings up a good point. One of the things that we talk about on this podcast series is all of the places where data centers, security, IT, and tech are needed.
Right.
And Jackson used to be fifth in the nation in supercomputing power. We're certainly not there now, but we still have a pretty
Mhm.
decent presence with a Corps of Engineers. But
Yeah.
even small companies in small towns can turn into very big companies and have, all kinds of challenges. So from a day-to-day perspective, outside
Hmm.
of grant writing, let's talk a little bit about the security industry and cybersecurity and some of
Yep.
the other organizations that you're attached to, the As Is chapter and InfraGard, and just talk about security as a whole. So if you had to pick a day in the life of the security dude, you know, what is your day like? What kind of things do you chase, and how hands-on and how involved do you get in the different aspects?
Well, the whole day to day, I mean, in general terms, the whole day to day is preventative, right? you're always, looking to, you're always looking at your metrics. You're always looking at what can you prevent, what can you maintain in your program that you can prevent, and then a little bit of the day to day is when something happens, you have to answer for why it happened. And it's funny. It's funny you asked me that because in my day to day, we have to, answer for everything. Whether it is a phishing attempt, whether somebody stole something, whether someone is getting a fine or looks like they may get a fine from the Coast Guard, or we need a little help, or the facility or the stakeholder needs a little help in liaising with, a regulatory agency, EPA, OSHA, whatnot. So a lot of that is preventative measures, and a lot of that is maintaining the program that you run, or the program that we run, and then a lot of that is improving. You're always improving. You would love to sit back and just throw your hands up and put things on automatic a lot of times, but that's not the case. And like that, that's not the case. You have to constantly look at your processes. You have to constantly look at what you're doing, right or wrong. You have to constantly look at the lessons learned, and you have to constantly improve on, what you're doing. So it's the day in the life. It's looking at that. It's assessing. It's improving. It's getting better. It's making sure that you're succeeding in your preventative measures, and making sure that when the time comes that you have to react, you'll be able to react in like manner. That's what the military says, has a phrase, and it's like train as you fight. Well, that's how you want to train. You want to train so that when it's time to fight, you know how to fight, and you're not second guessing yourself. So that's a little bit in the day of the life of what we do.
Yeah, so I always kind of equated security to, like, radar guns and radar detectors. Soon as people
Yeah.
do have better radar detectors, they come out with better radar guns.
Right, exactly.
So it's
Hey,
kind of a
man, but
round and round.
yeah, that's exactly what happens though. That's exactly what happens, right? You would think that, well, I figured out the adversary, so the adversary needs to just stay right there. No, the adversary is going to evolve, and so you've got to evolve with them. And so, yeah, that's funny though. I like that.
And if you watch reports and where the incidences and all come from, it's
Mhm.
amazing how many come from inside the organization versus outside the organization. You think about the bad operators on the outside, but disgruntled employees are a huge thing that you have to protect against too.
Man, disgruntled employees, that is one of the biggest things that you have to fight against. Well, you have to fight against the insider threat anyway, right? Wherever their intent lies, whether it is subconsciously or consciously, right? Because that isn't that's what these phishing attempts are, right? Somebody falls for the clickbait, they click on it, and they may not have wanted to do that, but that's still an insider threat because that happened inside your organization 9 times out of 10. Insider threat as far as somebody maliciously trying to do some things that they know are not right, or maliciously try to set themselves up to reap a benefit down the line, like a 0 day type of plot or something like that. I was looking at the other last year in 2019, there was a story. There was a consultant, and I believe the consultant worked for Siemens, and I think it was an oil and gas provider. And the oil and gas provider were seeing all these anomalies, and they're seeing all these things that popped up. And it just so happened that the consultant was planning things so that those things could trigger and those things can alarm, and they would call them. Because consultants like to get overtime, right? And consultants want you to call them when they're ready. And so that person was doing that, and so that person just happened to be on vacation, and they were the entity said, well, this is interesting. This person's on vacation, and all this stuff happened. And so that insider threat piece is so key. Whether it's subconsciously or whether it's conscious, whether it's malintent or whether it's just harmless, insider threat is the insider threat, regardless. And so you have to account for that.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta respond to it whether they intended to do it or not.
Right? Exactly.
And, I think part of what happens in the security realm too is evaluating the new tools that come to market,
Mhm.
figuring out, what software programs are the easiest to administer, but then you also have to couple
Mhm.
that with, people's access to the buildings and
Yep.
to the yards, and so, there's nothing that can 100% automate any of that. There's still personnel needed, and I don't
Mhm.
think we're ever really gonna get to the point where security is, fully automated. Now, certainly AI, I think, makes it a little bit easier to help detect
Right.
some of the threats and figure out some of the trends and instances, but there's always
Mhm.
gonna be that human person, don't you think?
Yeah, and so that's very key because as an army officer, I was fortunate as a captain to take the next officer candidate course or the officer educational course that you take as a major. And one of the things that we were talking about was just that that one of those instructors was real sharp, and he was giving us some. We finished the course, we were all done, everybody got a passing grade, and we were all relaxed at that point. And he was saying, "Well, let me leave you with some things." And then he was talking about how every time there's a cell phone that's created, data has just expanded, as far as gigs are concerned. And then he was talking about how, as far as automation was concerned, was that the military will never, as far as it's an ambulatory service, and an ambulatory vehicle, replace, a driver, a free thinking human with automation. That'll never happen. Now, obviously, we know automation is on the battlefield now, right, with UAS and drones. I'm in Afghanistan. I see a drone leave with a full package, and then the drone comes back with half a package, so I know what happened. But
Right.
the thing to note is that AI cannot replace everything. It just can't do that. There has to be a good mix and a good blend. You want everything automated. I'm a fan of automation, by the way. I do like that. I'm a fan of biometrics. I am a fan of that technology, crypto technology. I like it. um, you know, but at the same time, it can't replace a human, and the human part of it cannot be replaced, and that's what makes us human. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, somebody has to decide, and I think automation definitely helps us be better practitioners because it takes some of the mundane, kind of rudimentary stuff off the table, and then as it learns, it gives us better information that's actionable information. One of the problems you
Right.
have in IT as a whole is everybody has way too much information, and then we forget which part is actionable and just sifting through the pile of hay to find the proverbial needle.
Man. Oh man, Carrie. Oh man, we could talk about that all day. Actionable. We scream for that. A lot of the security briefings that we are privy to, because we do a lot of work with the Department of Homeland Security. We do a lot of work with law enforcement agencies on the federal, state, and local level. And God bless their heart, I love to get intelligence. That is one of the things that we love to do. I love to know the ports, or I love to know the next tactics, techniques, and procedures. I get it. But man, that stuff has to be actionable. And I think like a lot of the ISACs and a lot of the different places that provide that stuff really have to give actionable intelligence. What does this mean to me? Now, I tell you what, recent events, when everybody hears this podcast, they'll probably know what we're talking about. Recent events with Iran, right? Well, Iran is a threat actor. We know that, and I think the country, the United States, I think in 1985 deemed it that. What we know about them is their, techniques and procedures, right? We know that a lot of times they do stuff with infrastructure, oil and gas. We know that they do a lot of things, a lot of bad stuff with finance, bank and finance, right? So the actionable intelligence that I would be looking for is, okay, well, what's the next tactic that they would do with finance? That would be a Wells Fargo question or a City question or whatever. Or, hey, let me raise my hand. I'm in oil and gas, right? So I really care about what, they would do there. I wouldn't want to know about like anything else. So if I'm going to sit in a security briefing, or if I'm going to receive, information, I want that stuff to be actionable. What does that mean to me in my organization versus just receiving, information from a fire hose?
Right?
So, a lot of times And look, I'm a big proponent of the guy on the ground, right? Because I work it every day, right? I'm like, hey, what can you do to help my job? Because I'm the one that has to disseminate this to my stakeholders, and I have to dumb it. Well, I'm gonna say dumb it down. I wouldn't say that. That may be a strong thing to say, but at the same time, I have to make it palatable. I have to make it easy for them to digest. And so I need help with that. And if you give me actionable intelligence, man, I can move and shoot with the best of them. So, yeah, you have to have that.
Well, and I think as a security professional too, a big chunk of your job is helping other people understand A, that security is important, and B, yes,
Hmm.
people do those things. It's not
Right.
it's not that thing that always happens to somebody else. And in a lot of organizations, it's really unfortunate, but the
Hmm.
security team is sort of treated, as a more of a necessary evil,
Hmm.
heavy on the evil than
Yeah.
you know, an organization that can, a piece of the organization that can really enable things to happen better. And I'm sure as a multinational organization, the rules to play are very different in Europe than they are here, or in Asia than they are here, down to everything, intellectual property and,
Hmm.
data that you pass, and all the way to the product that you pass. All of that has to be secure from one end to the other.
Right. I think one of the biggest things that people have to remember is that you're always in a educational and informational stand where you're always educating. You always have to educate the stakeholder. You always have to educate the consumer out there. Um, you always have to educate. You have to tell people about security and why this matters, and you also have to sit there and say, okay, like people are really doing these bad things. I think that one of the best things that you can do as a person in your organization or as a consultant or as someone who is bringing this information is to, make sure you try to get up front in the beginning and ease the, listener or ease the reader into exactly some of these things. I'm gonna be honest. There is a situation that happened that I had knowledge of where it was pretty much a ransomware or an exploit attack where somebody talked about, oh, I know something about you, and I have this information, and I need you to, send $2,300 to my, Google account or whatever, and I'll give you this information. And everybody hears about it outside, but then when it actually happens to you, it's all like, oh man, you know, I can't believe that happened. And so, a lot of times what you have to do is you have to educate the reader, educate who's listening to that. And then educate them as far as like the steps. A lot of people may not want to call the cops, or a lot of people may not know who to call. They may not know that, hey, the FBI has a I3 line that you can email stuff to, and the field office will get back to your local law enforcement and help you out with that. A lot of people don't know that. So I think a lot of time our job, I know in my organization anyway, my job is to educate, is to tell folks, is to say, did you know? And hey, did you know this is the reason why I'm sending you a one liner with a white sheet attached to it or white paper attached to it, giving you some specifics on, this particular subject that I want you to be aware of and I want you to be more informed of. So, I think, from a educational standpoint, we've got to take that role because the more you teach, and watch this, the better that you teach, or the better that you'll learn new ways to communicate your point, you are, gonna win, and you're gonna get people to have a better situational understanding of any threat vector that you present to them on that period of time.
Well, and like we talked about actionable data, right? It has to mean something to them for them not to just blow it off.
Right, right, exactly,
And
exactly.
shadow IT comes up a lot when we talk about security and the ways
Hmm.
that, you know, people try to figure out different ways to get around security measures. So,
Mm,
that certainly becomes an issue. And if you don't, I read actually this morning about a company that just laid off 300 people and closed its doors because of
mm,
ransomware. and they
Yeah.
couldn't figure out, the ransom was too high and they tried to recuperate, but their backups weren't good. And so literally put 300 people out of work in a day.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, man, and it's a sad case, man, because I hate it. I hate to hear people. I hate number one. I hate to hear people have to pay out goo gobs of money, not going to a capital expenditure, not going to anything else, but it's going to something that may could have been prevented. I mean, I hate to hear those types of things. But one of the things to note is that it just really starts with, what risk are you willing to take? You answer that question. And when you answer that question, what are those actions that you're willing to take to mitigate that? Are you gonna buy it down, or are you gonna transfer that to something? Or are you just gonna avoid it? Or you're just gonna wait until something happens and then pay it off? Those types of questions, come up, and the more we get into the ones and zeros of this, um, the more the question is asked just for the more common sense thing. What are we doing? What are we really willing to accept? And, what are we willing to pay for? And what are we willing to take as, a disastrous effect? Or are we able to recover, if something happens? I mean, I hate to hear that kind of stuff, but, it's the reality, because at the end of the day, kind of like what I was just saying earlier, right? You present that information and you make sure you come from an educational standpoint, but at the end of the day, you've got the C-suite guys, and you've got the movers, shakers, and playmakers that make those decisions, that have to make a decision that's in your best interest, and sometimes those decisions are not always in your best interest. And so, like I said, I hate to hear those types of situations. I hate to see, I hate to see Toyota turn around and give out $20 million to someone because they didn't have the right backups. I mean, that's ridiculous, and
Yeah.
I just it pains me to see that.
And, I mean, that does bring up a point. It happens to a lot of big companies. And, in the security realm, you tend to rely on companies and software packages and all to kind of have your back. So you are,
Right.
at the end of the day, like you said, you are as strong as your weakest link. And back to the radar gun and radar detector analogy, right? The more
Yeah.
you do to protect yourself against it, the more other people figure out ways to do it, whether that be, there was a very popular online file sharing service that a lot of companies used back
Hmm.
several years ago. They found out for 3 weeks they were online with literally zero security at all
Yeah.
because their security
Hmm.
system had shut down and nobody knew that. So,
Yeah.
you have to be careful where that data goes. And you also have to be careful who has access to your site.
Oh man, and I
It's not
just
just cybersecurity, but physical security.
yeah, cybersecurity, physical security, a layered approach. You have to have that, and a lot of times you find that some of these companies have just not thought about that. And listen, I'm not saying I'm the best in sliced bread. Don't get me wrong. But some of these companies, you would be shocked at, just like Ring, right? This latest, and I'm sure you're aware of it, you've seen it, the latest issues with those Ring doorbells, those Ring cameras or whatnot, how, it's a two-layered approach. So it's a two-pronged problem, right? Well, number one, you have people who are not going to change their passwords, which that is a never-ending battle, right? You
Right.
know, not
This
changing
is
your
so much
passwords,
trouble.
not having a authentic password, or not having a layered approach to using various passwords. That's a thing. So I'm not going to change my password, right? And then you have on the other side the company, and the company, I want to say, like in the last couple of cases that I saw, I want to say that the company was really doing a lot of things, but then at the same time they were found at fault because out of everybody else out here, everybody has two-factor authentication, and guess what? Amazon, out of all people, Ring backed by Amazon, does not have two-factor authentication.
Well, I think
And
their problem too was some of the passwords were stored in clear text.
yeah, that's another thing. And look, Kerry, we can talk. You do a lot of work, and you do a lot of work with, you do a lot of work, and you talk a lot about HR, and you talk about a lot of misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is that it's only a ones and a zeros type of outlook. I like to use the analogy that, here in Jackson, Mississippi, up the road on I-55, we've got a Nissan plant, and the Nissan plant, they install at some point along the assembly line alarms. Well, the person sitting there installing the alarm doesn't always necessarily know what the alarm does, right? The alarm may, be able to ring, but they don't know that it can call OnStar or it can, have GPS tracking. Some folks just don't know that. Well, that's the same thing here. A lot of people think that, you know, it's an IT problem and only an IT problem. Or some people think that, well, physical security guys, you don't know what you're talking about. Instead of having a blended approach where you're looking at your risk, a blended approach where you're looking at the physical, and the blended approach where you're looking at a point where all of those converge.
Well,
Um, you know,
as humans,
yeah.
we wanna be trusting by nature, right?
Hmm.
We would like to think that those bad actors don't exist or they're not after us, they're after somebody else,
Hmm.
but they're after everybody.
Man, they after everybody. They're after everybody, and to see what they can get. I read a stat the other day. Over the period of time that North Korea has been operating, they have billions of dollars in exploitation. Billions. Now I don't know how they're going to convert all of that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, malware here, ransomware here, a little bit DDoS here, a little bit there, and you're sitting pretty good. Now I'm sure they can take those billions of dollars and fund something that we all don't like. And so that's how you have to look at this game. That's how you have to look at what we're doing and what we're talking about on a daily basis. So yeah, it's crazy.
So let's chat a little bit about, I know that you got some of your training in school, but there's a
Hmm.
couple organizations that you work with that are dedicated really to security personnel, one being As Is, and one of
Right.
the cool things I like about, ASIS, we're not supposed to say As Is anymore, I was told, but
Yeah.
ASIS is
Right. Yeah.
that
You're not supposed to say that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but one of the things about
Uh,
ASIS is they do have a scholarship program, which is really
right.
cool for
Mhm.
young kids and students that are trying to
Right.
work, and I know we're working on some student outreach here in the state of
Hmm.
Mississippi.
That's
Excuse me.
right.
So talk a little bit about how you got involved with them, and then talk about the difference between them and InfraGard and what InfraGard is.
Sure. So, I am the chapter chair of the Chapter 80 branch of ASIS, and so the regional vice president, a guy by the name of Ron Martin. Ron Martin is really adjunct professor, consultant. He sits on a couple of boards. He sits on some of the boards at ASIS that deal with policy and everything. But he has started this push. He was real big into student members, and one of the reasons why he was big in student members because number one, uh, folks don't know anything about security. They don't know security as a career. Heck, I didn't even understand security as a career, before I got, in my current job that I have now. And so what I have saw with him is this push to get to a lot of the universities and talk to these career counselors about various aspects of it, whether it's insurance, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's IT, whether it is criminal justice, right? All of these things that have a security nexus, he was real instrumental in all of that. And now, chapter chair, I can get voted in and year out, but regional vice president of a specific region, he's got a limited time frame. And so, what kind of stepped up our game, or what kind of started making me want to work with people like you, is that I didn't want to see that die. I didn't want to see that momentum go because right now, my chapter, we've got several people from Jackson State University. We have several people from Alcorn State here. We've got several members that are in and around, Mississippi State and other places. And so I didn't want to see that die. But that's a little bit of it. And then InfraGard. InfraGard is the FBI's outreach, something equivalent to the say something, see something type of situation. And through that, and through the critical infrastructure, where there's education, finance, oil and gas, energy, food and industry, those critical infrastructures, InfraGard, what they do is they have a dedicated FBI special agent, and his or her sole purpose in life is to liaison with private industry to help bring, some situation awareness. You may sit through a briefing. You may, sit through something where, you guys can collaborate on a conference and bring in people to talk about, some of the latest and greatest. But, so through InfraGard and through As Is, we are really trying to reach some of the, younger generation, some of the millennials, some of the guys who, have not maybe thought about security as a career, and some things that translate into the real world, and how you can go to an organization and really help that organization grab intelligence, be forward thinking on risk management in order to better business, and better the entity's livelihood. So a lot of kids don't understand that, and a lot of kids don't see that big picture. So you have to come in there. And I know one of the things that you talk about, and one of the things that you've talked about in your series of podcasts there, is how a lot of times the curriculum of the professors and the curriculum of some of the schools is not keeping up with the current trends or the ebbs and flows of commerce, so to speak. I'm definitely institution of higher learning has its place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying throw it out, but what I am saying is that a lot of times outside help, people who have been there, done that, or are doing it now, they should have somewhat of a say so in or suggestion into how to shape these young minds. When I was at Mississippi State University, if somebody off the street that's been there and done that would come and say something to me about what I could do with my future, I would definitely listen to him. Why? Because I know that I want to make some money, right? And I want to have a house one day, and I might want to get married, and I might have kids, and I might want to drive somewhere. So what you have is someone that could, give that, expertise and give that experience and a synopsis of some of the struggles they've gone through, or some of the, successes that they've had. So, I didn't want that to die, and I didn't want that. I wanted that to keep going. And so, I'm looking for the opportunity where I can sit down and talk to these young guys, and share some things with them. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a good point on the curriculum, and that comes up pretty much on every single podcast because a lot of, there wasn't really the same need 6 months ago that there is for
Right.
today in security, and certainly
Yep.
data centers are something that is a very evolving, um, part of IT, and the
Mhm.
standard IT curriculum is almost outside of programming and some of those skills that you can move forward with and do different things with. And, there's new languages that come around every day, and there's new updates to those languages. So it definitely always changes, which is, part of the draw for people, I think, that are in any type of STEM field, because, you know, everybody likes that change and likes that continuous learning. But, to your point, cybersecurity is not a class curriculum in a lot of colleges, but every single organization needs that. Whether
Oh
they're
man.
small and they outsource it, like,
Mhm.
using a CTO as a service like we offer, or, you know, having independent consultants, and even just if you have it, you think you're doing amazing things, it doesn't hurt to have somebody come in and just lay their eyes on it once a year from, one of these other organizations that can
Mhm.
bring to you stuff that they've seen elsewhere, or, you know, have that second pair of eyes just to make suggestions and see what's outdated and see what's new, because just keeping up with developments in this industry is a full-time job by itself, whether you do
Right.
anything from an action standpoint, it's a full-time job.
Yeah, it's a full-time job, and I know one company that I know of. I was talking to a person there, and one of those people, so they were a big oil response company, consultant. So, oil and gas, you spill something, you have a
Spill something, say
company.
something.
Yeah, spill something. Say, yeah, well, you gotta say something. You better say something if you spill something, right? So, and they have these companies that come out there and help them with the oil response, right? Well, a lot of their clients were coming to them and they were saying, man, you guys know what you're doing with this oil response stuff. What about cyber? What happens if I get an attack and I need somebody to not only remediate the situation, but I need somebody to maybe look at some of the artifacts to tell me this, what in the world were they trying to do? And so what you find yourself with is the 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 question. You say, well, do we bring somebody in? Do we outsource that? When I look and I see about bringing somebody in, man, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, you know, just to sit down and to look at the situation and to look where you are, to your point about, the audits and having somebody come in, a good consultant is going to come in and is going to say, man, what are you guys doing anyway? Instead of trying to sell a service or try to sell something off the top, some people just come down to the bare minimum. What do you have a policy about it? It's always good to have somebody to come in and look at it. It's always good to step back and say, hey, look, are we doing this right? Yeah, we did this right 10 years ago. Are we doing it right now? And so, I
Yeah, software
definitely
updates
like
don't
that.
equate to updating your security policy.
Man, software updates equate to Capital One and somebody who used to work at Capital One who has knowledge of AWS making somebody pay. That's what it equates to. That's what it equates. Poor Capital One. I love Capital One. I bank with Capital One. Gotta check that out. But yeah, that's what it equates to, man. You have to check your holes there. You got to check and see what you
And,
got.
it's really funny there, AFCOM, which is a uh, data center managers and
Hmm.
owners and operators and all, they have what's called a leaders lab where they bring together a bunch of people that have, good responsibility related to a certain topic, and then everything is sort of roundtabled and a white paper comes out of that. It's a really cool program.
Hmm.
But I was the moderator at one of the leaders labs a while back, and somebody from one of the airlines was there and said that they could not get any money for maintenance upgrades and security upgrades until one of their competitors had a huge breach and
Wow.
problem. And then the CEO called him in the office and said, "How much do you need? I'll write a check right now."
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
sometimes, learning from your best competitor is definitely valuable, but I think it's kind of a wake up call too, when you think, it's not going to
Yeah.
really happen to me. They're after somebody else. And then when you see them hit somebody else, you think, I'm similarly situated. That could be an issue.
Yeah, and I find that with companies. I definitely find that with some of the people on the right and the left side of what we do. That's one of the things they ask. They like, hey, well, what is everybody else doing? I mean, because that's kind of what everybody, even even stakeholders within our company, because we're multi-segmented. So a lot of times this segment will ask us, well, what's that segment doing? And then go find us what the best practices are in the industry. And that means we call trade associations, we call people that are our counterparts in various places, and because that's what people do, they want to know that. But gosh darn it, Carrie, wouldn't you want to just go ahead and handle it to the best of your ability up front?
Yeah.
And but but that's not. I guess that's not my that's above my pay grade. But what I'm saying is that yeah, that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people want to see what happens next door. And if somebody's changing their roof down the street, you're saying, honey, maybe we need to change our roof.
Yeah. These houses were built about the same time.
It's about
If
to about
they're
the same
leaking,
time in the same neighborhood.
yeah. So, but
Right,
it
right.
is funny how it works that way. But I think that just to bring up the point of
Mhm.
trade associations, if you're in anything in IT,
Yeah.
you should absolutely have a budget to be in these associations because the stuff
Yeah.
that you learn from your peers and being able to bounce ideas off of folks and see what works and what doesn't work. One of my tricks when you're doing a procurement exercise is to go and look on
Mhm.
a company's website and find people that implemented the solution 3 years ago. Look at the old press releases, call them for references. Don't ask, don't
Yeah.
use the references they give you. But trade associations are great for that. And
Yeah.
even if you have to kind of um, set a day aside to go travel to go to one, or, to go to the conferences and see the latest and greatest. I really think that they are undervalued for what you do to be able to shortcut a giant stack of information down
Mhm.
to, something that's digestible in a reasonable period of time that doesn't just get ignored because it's an insurmountable amount of information that you're trying to cram on top of the job that you already do. So,
Yeah, and they're good for that. They're also good for professional development. They're also good to, just like you said, see what everybody else is doing. Um, you know, I am blessed to work for a company that promotes that. The trade associations, we get a lot out of those. I always, hey, one of the things I do like about some of the consultants that we work for in those trade associations, I said, man, after I talk to you and after I come to see everybody, I come back and it looks like I'm smart. But I really just use some of the stuff that I heard, and I'm able to, apply that. And one of the things that the ASIS, their global exchange, the Global Security Exchange, the GSX, all these acronyms. What I did was I was able this year, well, I say this year, last year, 2019, what I was able to do was there was a need in our organization, and we were working on intelligence. And we were working on intelligence gathering and intelligence dissemination. Hey, we're in Mexico now. What does this mean? And we were able to sit down, and that whole time, I kid you not, was focused on nothing but business continuity, intelligence gathering, intelligence services, data mining services, all of those things. And when I did that, man, I walked away really understanding the benefits of a global security operations center, just the SOC in general, whether you're talking IT, whether you're talking physical security. you know, those places are a wealth of knowledge, a cornucopia of different people that you can talk to and sit next to. And one gentleman that I sat next to in the business continuity class just got hired on with Robinhood, the financial guys, the penny stock guys. And
oh yeah.
he was saying, hey man, they hired me to do business continuity, and I'm 6 months out, and I just got here, and I just graduated from I think it was Berkeley or something. And he was like, "Hey man, what do you know?" Oh, okay, well let's talk. Let's get a cup of coffee. I can tell you what I know about business continuity. And
Right.
so that is the benefit out of going to some of those things. And definitely, sometimes you got to do it on your own dime. But a lot of times, man, I would say get that budgeted. Talk to your organization and let them know. We had to do justifications on it, right? Tell them the justification. Say, hey, if I do this, I can help the company do X, Y, and Z. And 9 times out of 10, they'll let you do it if you can explain it correctly. So
Yeah, and it's good for networking too, for if you decide you wanna one thing we talk about, in this series is how if you don't like what you're doing, you can move to the left a little bit, there's another job. So,
yeah.
these associations are great ways to get exposure to different things. And in cybersecurity, I
Sure.
mean, there's a million jobs you can have in
Oh man.
physical
Yeah.
security, cybersecurity,
Yes. Yep.
consulting to the security business, and, they're a good way to get exposure to those too.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're running close to our time limit here,
Yeah.
but if you wanted to impart some wisdom on those moving forward, what uh, what good words of wisdom would you have to say?
Man, do what they told me to do in the military. Be rigidly flexible. And one of those things that I say is just make sure you're always adapting. Things you're adapting, but then understand that while you're adapting, things never change. You know, we were always talking about how it's funny. It's very funny how when I graduated college in 2005, like Twitter and everything else and Google, that kind of was just getting their start and everything. And then now, who knew, man? Everything is like based off of that, and everything's based off of Facebook, and everything's based off of Instagram and Twitter. It's funny, but you know what? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Because we could say that 30 or 40 years prior, when the introduction of radio or the introduction of TV, the first presidential debate, with John F. Kennedy. I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and you have to be rigidly flexible, but then understand, where everything originated from and how you can use that to help you professionally develop, and then help whoever you're servicing develop, whether it's the entity, whether you're a consultant and you're working for a client. How can you use those things to help? And I think that the other thing that I would leave is that intelligence is key. um, During that global exchange in Chicago 2019, we listened to one of the CEO. I can't remember, he was like the fifth, the sixth, or the seventh CEO of Jacobs Engineering. He said that he does not make a move without touching base with his global security team. And this is anything from buying a business to anything. And I think that if you're in a position where you can manage and you can understand the intelligence and you can disseminate that, man, you're as good as gold. And so I think that if you follow some of those things right there, man, you'll definitely be successful.
Yeah, and I can remember a time, and I guess we've all sort of met those people that think if they hold on to all the knowledge themselves, it's job security. But certainly in security, there's a lot of give and take, and you have to be able to share information to receive information. And,
Yeah.
it is a really good tight knit community, and
Hmm.
that, people are willing to do that, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would do that. I think that in other areas and other concentrations, I would say that, and I do wholeheartedly agree with you that in the security industry, it's a little bit tight knit. So you would not, I think, run into someone who just does not want to help you. I think if anything, people would get upset that they could not tell you more.
Yeah.
So I do agree with that. If you sit next to a security professional and you're a security professional, you guys are gonna be on the same page. You know the ins and outs, and I wouldn't see any resistance, as far as like sharing information and
Yeah, you
giving,
do end up
the
with some
common knowledge.
really, yeah, good resources, and certainly friends for life, I think.
Oh yeah, I've had millions of people. Not I say millions of people, excuse me, but
Aren't you
I've
popular?
had I've had dozens of people help me out along my way, and oh man, I've just been grateful, for the opportunity to help me out. Like I said, they make me look smarter, so everybody helps with that. So, yeah.
Well, a couple things. First, thank you for your time today, for sure.
Oh man, no
Also,
problem.
thank you for your service and for everything you're doing with As Is and InfraGard here in the Mississippi, Louisiana area. And, I certainly look forward to doing a lot more stuff with you there. And for everybody else that's listening, we appreciate your time as well. And we hope to you listen in on a future podcast. Have a great day.